Good evening, everyone. Hello. This is part 4 in the series Redefining Principle versus Postmodernism. Today we're beginning to look at something that I call the Marxist Marketing Strategy. The Marxist Marketing Strategy is the method by which the postmodernists try to bring in various pieces of legislation, try to sell their ideas in order to make their money, but at one and the same time, these ideas bring about social decay. So the rest of us suffer the negative and harmful consequences of their legislative strategy. So just quickly review something from the past. The ideal for human beings is something called the Three Blessings Framework. It's the ideal for people living in democracy, where people all are sovereign citizens and all have a responsibility to behave in ways that help them, but also help society to flourish at one and the same time. So these Three Blessings framework or Three Blessings lifestyle involves me striving to become a fruitful individual, a wholesome individual who makes a positive impact on the world. Then if I want children, then I should marry. For this allows me to best protect my children and nurture them. And lastly, it's my responsibility to feed myself and my family and develop my talents, and that helps me and my family, but it helps society at one and the same time. So since we're all kings and queens of a democracy, just like we expect the king and queen to act nobly, we are asked to do the same. Now, because this is the ideal for human beings, it's the only framework that allows for a consistent set of human rights that aren't, which are separate from, you might say, man-made human rights. But these are my freedom, my human rights, and my freedom to pursue this Three Blessings lifestyle. So if whatever I need to do to become fruitful or to marry and best protect my children and feed my family, those are my natural responsibilities and therefore have a natural right to pursue those responsibilities. So this framework provides the West with a set of rights that we once understood. And we all have equal rights. In this framework, some of us may not want to get married and have children, but we still can be fruitful on an individual level and we can still contribute through our careers. And as we all strive to become more wholesome and build better families and improve the careers and how they enhance social well-being, the blessings pour down and our societies flourish. And the opposite is evidently true too. If I become less fruitful, if I have poorer core values, if I end up in jail, if I don't take care of my children, if I expect others to feed me and my family, then society goes downhill. So the 1950s Christian framework in the USA, UK, we're all children of God. The laws affirm we all have equal rights. In other words, all have equal responsibilities. And adults and children had in the 1950s an equal right to life, a natural right to be free from slavery, to not be bought and sold, a natural right not to be forced to pay off someone else's debt, an equal right to say what we believe to be true, the protection of the Nuremberg Code, which said we're not allowed to be operated on, or medical experimentation can't take place on us without our full consent and without us knowing the full consequences of what's going to happen, and we are capable of making that decision without undue pressure or without other hindrances like our age. And children, if possible, have the natural right to know the daily protection and nurturing of both their biological parents, because this gives them the best chance to allow them to grow up, to become fruitful, to fulfill those three blessings life starts with. When they are denied that love and protection, they are more at risk and they are less likely to be able to fulfill their responsibility. But today we have a situation where the natural rights of the child has been taken away. This is the 2020 woke postmodernist legal framework, which the postmodernists have taken away the equal rights of the child, though the child is less protected on every level. And so the 1850s child had to worry about whether they would live long enough to get to adulthood. Over 25% or so died in young age. But today's child, before they're even born, they have to worry about whether they are going to be killed, to life terminated through abortion, whether they've already been sold within a surrogacy or IVF framework, whether they've been sold against their will. They won't have their mother's love, their father's love, or both. They don't have the protection of the Nuremberg Code anymore. IVF treatments can lead to severe disabilities or to long-term health problems. So medical experimentation has taken place before they even were allowed to ask whether it could take place on them. And within transgenderism, the children are not, under 18-year-old children are not old enough to make a decision about whether they want to be sterilized. They don't. Under the drugs, we don't know the long-term effects because we've never given these drugs, these cross-sex hormones, to such young children before. And so we can't inform them of the negative effects, and they're too young to make these decisions in any rational way. But still, they are put on these drugs and harmed by them. They don't have any right anymore to know the daily protection and nurturing of both their biological parents. They're more likely to, because of that, children today are much more likely to be raised outside of the love of their biological parents and suffer from a whole range of extra risks, such as an attachment trauma, whereby they don't, they feel they severely miss the love of one of their parents, and they are demotivated from life because of that. Or they have extra risk, like almost every other family structure has higher risk of sexual abuse, for example, or physical abuse. They have very limited protection from harmful adult desires. Pornography is having a seriously negative impact on our young people, seriously impacting on their ability to build loving relationships. We have comprehensive sex education, which is teaching children things about sex well before they understand about it, and encouraging them to participate in early sexual experiences which can seriously harm their lives with diseases or abortions. And then there's grooming, and the authorities looking the other way of young children being sexually passed around by various groups. And then you have the trafficking of children and much more. And then we have more, they have limited free speech. They're not allowed to say what they really believe to be true anymore. The woke universities and schools don't allow them to talk openly about their their beliefs, and they are forced to pay off this generation's massive national debt. So the children today have a much harder time to grow up to become fruitful individuals who can build solid, loving families. And this is anybody who understands the data can see the negative effects that ripple throughout society through harming so many children. So the sentence is basically the social sentence that should guide society. It's how you treat the child, so will be the future of the nation. And since we're hurting so many children who are less able to live a fruitful life, a competent life, then the nation is in a downhill trajectory. So the loss of natural rights of the child within the legal framework increases the number of children experiencing lineage decline, which means they are less capable of building a three blessings lifestyle than their parents. And this leads, when you have so many children who are experiencing lineage decline, this leads to national decline. And the nations are forgetting what they once knew, which was how you treat the child. So will be the future of your nation. Europe must have developed under a lineage improving culture, and that's the way it went forward and improved, and now it's going the opposite direction. So the basic law is when the state takes natural rights away, even if it seems to be for a good reason, it is always the case that more social harm than goodness is created. So when the state takes away the rights and responsibilities we have within the three blessings framework, harm happens, and the reason is that they're taking away natural rights. It makes it harder for citizens to act responsibly, which is what's happening to children. Their rights are taken away. It makes it harder for them to grow up, to be responsible members of society. And it also encourages citizens to act less responsibly. So when the state takes away a natural right, it takes away a natural responsibility, and people act less. There's more and more people act less responsibly, so they abandon their children more, or they are less likely to get a job, more likely to live on welfare, and such like. So the long-term social damage is inevitable if you take away natural rights. It's always the case. When a natural right is taken away, then more harm than good is created. So we can see the effect. Here we're entering the third generation of violating children's rights on a massive scale, and we can see the obesity levels of children have shot up some 400% for teenagers since the 1970s. Here we have male and female drug overdoses in America, and death by drug overdose. So that's shot up since 2000 by some 600%. And here we have inability to marry, struggle to marry. Amongst the poorest, especially, the 40%, over 40% have never married. And even the higher income people are negatively affected. And there's all kinds of data like unsheltered homelessness, people living in the streets in tent cities and things like this. This is shooting up in even the last 6 years. So basically, as more children get hurt by the legislative framework, then we have more people depressed, more obese, more living in drug abuse, more addictions, more in jail, more people struggling to marry, struggle to stay married, more people purposely single parenting and living off the welfare benefits. There's no, or having no children, and that has seriously impact on the finances, long-term finances of a nation, or more people experimenting with same-sex sexuality, which comes with its own range of higher risks, which cost society. Then there's more homelessness, more benefits, more claimed disabilities, more struggle on the poverty line, more food banks needed, and the wealth gap based upon family formation grows. So those who can build long-term families are typically wealthier. They pass their wealth on to their children than single-parent families, for example. And that leads to a serious wealth gap. So we have this is a situation of the West today. And why is this happening? Why the West, which led the world in flourishing and health and human health and well-being and set up such high standards of living, the West is now it was built on a Christian foundation where children were protected, and now it's becoming a decaying post-Christian culture. So why has it ended up like this? And it's ended up like this because of the Marxist marketing strategy, in main part. What is this strategy? It's a purposely designed to take away natural rights. So it's a legal, a legal strategy to impose laws on society which take away natural rights, and therefore they cause decay. And ultimately, the goal is to bring about a socialist welfare state with more and more people that rely on the state and less able to live fruitful lives. And that offers other groups of people power and money. And that's the postmodernists. That's why they do it. Now, they don't care about the well-being of society. They just care about having the power to control society and rake in the money. So what is the Marxist marketing strategy? It's the art of convincing society to buy socially harmful products, socially harmful laws. And these laws make some uncaring people a whole lot of money, but because these laws always harm people's natural rights, they leave decay in their wake, and they therefore leave the rest of us to live with a brokenness that's been created, which is what we all sense around us today, the growing sense of knife crime and many other social problems that didn't exist 50 years ago. So what is this Marxist marketing strategy? How does it play out? Well, we can see how it works by looking at economic Marxism. What happened in the USSR? The game that was played by the Marxists at that time to take control of Russia and basically set about in motion a state of terminal decline, you might say, under oppressive leadership. How does this work? We can see by looking at this economic Marxism model. So they start off by using the media and the university system, and they express a desperate level of concern for a specific minority or a group of citizens. And we must have compassion, fairness for this group of citizens. And the left-wing media pushes this storyline through the media. We must care, we must care, we must do something about these people. We must. Now, for Marxism always splits society into groups and chooses one group who it calls the oppressed or ones that are treated unfairly, and then it runs a storyline to supposedly help that minority. So in this case, it was the poor. And then they demand a political solution, but this political solution doesn't require lineage improvement to solve the plight of the minority. It doesn't require that the human beings grow to a higher level of competence, fruitfulness, so that society can solve its problems because as people become more fruitful, then the social problems disappear step by step. So it doesn't require that. So it's not a natural method to bring about social development. In this case, they asked for a revolution. So then they tell some believable lies to get people on board. It's the rich who are keeping you poor, and poverty will be a thing of the past. Once we're in control, we will share the money around, and poverty will end. You will not have suffering. You'll live in some socialist paradise. Yeah, but the natural pathways that the West developed and allowed democracy to flourish was not through revolution, but through developing better schooling and developing better human rights framework, and allowing the free market to develop. And so the West developed that this was an alternative. We will have a revolution and to steal from the wealthy and kill off those who we don't like. So the Marxist marketing strategy always involves a legal solution that allows the minority who they claim to support to harm the natural rights of other groups of citizens, which weakens the Christian foundation because we're no longer seen as equal. So when one group can go around legally harming the rights of harming other groups of citizens, then we don't have equal rights, and the Christian foundation disappears. And so we have this statement in Marxism: the ends justify the means. It will be worth it. We can do some killing, we can steal the property, and the end result, the socialist paradise, it will be worth all the suffering we caused. Of course, it's never worked out like that. They refuse to look at the damage, the ripple effects of taking natural rights away. They have no compassion for all the people they harmed in the revolution, all the people they put into gulags, all the families they destroyed, all the people they killed. There's no compassion for anybody apart from who technically the worker we're having compassion for, but the worker could also end up in the gulag or be starved to death, as in the Ukrainians. So there's all this lies and damage, and there was almost no growth in the Soviet Union for 70 years, and there was a lot of alcoholism and despair. So anybody who disagreed with this political endeavor, who said, no, the best way forward is to have a democracy and we'll develop like the West, with people having the freedom to use their talents and skills to build successful lives and families. Anybody who disagreed with the revolution had a label stuck on them. You're a member of the bourgeoisie, you don't care about the poor, which is evidently rubbish. Many people cared about the poor, but they wanted democracy, which would help the poor more than Marxism would. And then, in claiming natural rights from the citizens, the state automatically becomes authoritarian. So when the state takes away equal rights for different groups of people, then it automatically becomes authoritarian. And so a politician can say, we can take the lives from these people or take the money from these people because we are more powerful than they are. And lastly, at the end, who gained from the revolution? Well, it was the people in charge of the revolution had very nice lifestyle. They had summer cottages. They had special shops they could shop in. If you remember the Communist Party, you got treated specially. You had special rights. And the bankers who bankrolled the revolution benefited from a lot of wealth that was given to them afterwards. But everybody else suffered from a very, I want to say, soul-destroying economy. But the Marxists didn't care about that. They cared about the Marxist leaders cared about their ability to go to the opera and control the nation. So this Marxist strategy gives rise to cartels. So that was economic Marxism, and so they've taken this same game plan, this marketing strategy, and they've applied it to various issues in the West. So various laws and political endeavors are pushed forward by using this exact same strategy of choosing a specific group and having compassion for them. And then introducing a law which is not a sensible law. It's not one within the three blessings framework. It ultimately takes away rights from other groups of citizens, which then brings about social decline. But these cartels who push forward each law or each social issue, they're really like drug cartels. You can imagine them like that. They're a group of usually made up from university departments, left-wing activists in the media, and society and various charities. There are always some industrialists there making money, and then there are the politicians who are receiving donations from the industrialists, and they get money. So this group work together, and when somebody complains about these laws, the media attacks them and destroys their careers. So they act like thugs. They have like a thug-like nature. And they push forward their ideas that make them a lot of money, but create social decay, just like drug cartels do. So we have all these cartels that control the social dialogue. So we have the abortion cartel, which is abortion clinics making loads of money with the support of university departments, which make a lot of money from the brokenness that abortion creates. And they need more. So we need more social workers, and women's studies, and things like this. So we have the divorce cartel, made up of lawyers and various other industries which benefit from divorce. We must have, so this is a poorly formulated divorce law, at least the divorce cartel. There's the IVF and surrogacy cartels. So they're pushed forward with, we must have concern for the childless couple, but we're not allowed to look at the damage that this causes to society. Then there's the transgender cartel, the climate change cartel, which pushes forward a narrative which says we need wind power and solar, and which leads to a very unstable energy future, and makes a lot of groups a lot of money, and causes more and more people to die from cold. And we have the DEI, the Department of Equity and Inclusivity, in universities and businesses, and this cartel very choosy about who they hire, and cause social decline by hiring people who are less competent than other candidates. Then we have the illegal immigrant cartel made up of lawyers and other charities that benefit from illegal immigration. We had the COVID cartel, which benefited from the locking up of society, and we have the matter of the damage it caused. Then we have the welfare benefits cartel, which is largely made up of civil servants and lawyers and other things who benefit from having a large number of people benefit. So all these are pushed forward by this saying, oh, we have to care about this group of people, but we're not allowed to look at the damage that the laws do to society. So the West was dominated by one form of, the USSR was dominated by one form of Marxism, and it crippled the economy. It brought about massive drug abuse and massive levels of poverty lying existence, but it was just one form of Marxism. Today we have 10, some are much older than others. So the divorce cartel and the abortion cartel are the main ones that have brought us to the point where we have 0% growth pretty much all in Europe for the last few years, 1% if we're lucky. This is Soviet era growth level. Every single social indicator of social well-being is constantly showing decline. There isn't an area where people up in the West are, in general, on average, becoming more competent, more wholesome, more able to build families, more able to hold down jobs. There isn't, it's only negative. It's not the right way to say it, but the Western nations are some 80% Marxist, but it basically shows that the West is in a Marxist, living under several Marxist-driven paradigms, which cause a lot of social decline, but make some groups a lot of money. And unless you get rid of these cartels, there's no hope to get back to the natural rights and the natural responsibilities that will build about a flourishing society. So, yeah, the West is just constantly going into debt and no growth. And this is in large part due to these laws, and a lot of these other ones, like for example the DEI cartel, where you hire less competent people, or the IVF and surrogacy cartels, which spread its tentacles through the redefining of marriage, are recent ones, and the negative effects of these cartels will manifest them more and more in the next few years, and things will just go back from bad to worse. And there's serious concern because other nations which haven't got these cartels dominating them are doing much better, often achieving 3 or 4 or 5% growth, and it doesn't take many years of that for those nations to overtake the West. So, for example, Poland the Polish citizens are expected to have an average wealth higher than the British citizens by 2050. So the West is kind of like stuck because these cartels are doing so much damage. So we can see this. We can look at one example of this cartel and one say paradigm in action, how they control the dialogue and how they bring about decline. So if you understand gender dysphoria 10 years ago, pre-2013, it was a very small area of psychology. It was seen to be a psychological issue, the fact that somebody seems to be a bit confused about which sex they were. At that time, it mainly affected boys and young men who had it called autogynephilia. About 50% of the boys who turned up in clinics to help children with gender dysphoria were experiencing same-sex attraction, and they were wondering whether they should have operations to look like members of the opposite sex. Autism was very common, but almost all the people who turned up had pre-existing mental disorders. In other words, they had other issues which caused concern for parents or clinicians before this gender dysphoria appeared. But with counseling and time and patience, and almost all these children didn't have to go through ghastly operations and have bits of their body cut off and become sterilized. They could learn to live quite happily in their natal sex and move on with their lives. So this was because this was basically had been solved. We had protocols for dealing with these children. The issue was basically solved. It was a quiet space in the science, and we could get on with the social, discussion and not worry about these children or the few men who ultimately became transsexuals. But the cartel, just after the redefining of the social purpose of marriage, the cartel sprung into action. The media, the university system, the pharmaceutical companies, the left-wing activists, and the politicians, their cartels sprang together and started to collude and create and use the Marxist-infused marketing strategy to change the whole social discussion around this area. And you can listen to Jennifer Bilek on YouTube. She's written a very good book recently, which explains how the industry, this cartel is working together for the sake of making huge amounts of money for them, no matter the harm they do to children and society. So this is all planned attack on this specific area of psychology. So basically, it turned a psychological issue. They turned the psychological into a political rights issue. And they did this by saying that all the children who turned up at gender clinics were born in the body of the wrong sex. They don't have a psychological issue. They can't be helped through counseling. They all should be transitioned, and anybody who tries to offer them counseling is uncaring towards these children, and there's no harm in them cutting their body parts off and taking cross-sex hormones for life. They can live a happy life in there and express their real self. So they came up with these lies, all of which were lies, and then they destroyed the careers of the few specialists in this field who had successfully helped gender-confused kids to live happily in their natal sex. And so basically, this through the media control, this cartel controlled the news storyline and set about basically transitioning loads of children and making the money from that. So the marketing strategy that was used, the Marxists basically went like this: express a desperate level of concern for a specific group of citizens, the gender confused, media onslaught, get us all artistically worried about them, and they'll commit. Then to demand a specific political solution to solve their plight, which doesn't involve any kind of growth or healing to take place. They don't need to heal, they're not sick, they're not mentally unwell, they're just born in the body of the wrong sex, give them drugs and operations and they'll be happy. And then they told their believable lies. Counseling won't help the children. You could really change your sex, which is not true. You always have to deal with your natal sex. So the sentence, born in the body of the wrong sex, no, most people are not like that. They're just confused. And the biggest one of all, they will commit suicide if you don't let them transition immediately. So people were terrified of the consequence, and they'll commit suicide if we just don't, cut off their body parts and give them drugs. But we better do it in an unquestioning way. This was a disaster for these children who really needed protection from adults and counseling to help them through what they were going through. So the solution, of course, requires that it's a Marxist solution, so it always requires natural rights are taken away from other citizens. So the child's natural right to the Nuremberg Code was denied them, and the right of society to a biologically based definition of male and female, which is the most fundamental category that society has a right to. We're all clear where we stand. We all can look at somebody and clearly say, oh, you have the DNA of a male and female. We understand there's nothing more solid than that. And without that, you can go off into some kind of cuckoo land, and which is fine for a fairy tale, but it's not. You can't build civil society on this, on a non-scientific foundation. So, of course, the postmodernists refuse to look at all the damage that they are creating through this storyline, the hurt children. There's no compassion for all the people they're harming, the women's sports, the demotivating effect it has on women in sports, the demotivating, the worrying of many women to go to the public, swimming pool because men might be there. The fear of rape in places where they're bodily vulnerable, like prisons. The databases for doing scientific research are corrupted because NATO men are claiming to be women, and drugs are being tested on NATO males, which are designed for NATO females, and the results are corrupted. And the end result, it can only be decline of the university system and economic decline, all for the sake of trying to help a tiny number of people feel a bit better about themselves. The huge, massive social damage. And the sentence that got thrown at them is not you're a member of the bourgeoisie, it was you're transphobic. When people are not transphobic, they are trans legislation phobic or trans policy phobic, because they see the damage that transgender laws and policies do for other groups of people. But people just were terrified of losing their jobs, and the doctors just washed their hands and transitioned children who they knew to have psychological issues, but they didn't want to fight the cartel. And the state becomes more authoritarian as it pushes these laws into the social fabric. So as it takes away rights from women and men and children. So sentences like, women, you must undress in front of these men. It's a terribly authoritarian statement of a few politicians to claim that they have the authority to demand women do this. Or kids, you don't have a right to counseling, which is very authoritarian. And lastly, at the end of it all, these cartel members, they get the money from their lives, from transitioning all these children. The left-wing activists who went to the schools and talked about transgenderism, got paid, and they got sponsorship from companies, And then the gender studies departments grew as more and more, this issue became bigger, and so the university departments benefited from their lives, and the politicians got money for passing the laws. So the Democrats got a lot of money from the various companies that were involved in transitioning your children. And they control the dialogue, and they laugh all the way to the bank, and the rest of us are running around. Every school has endless hours of discussion and wasted time, and children being hurt, and parents crying their eyes out and terrified of their children being caught up in this and being sterilized, and their children unable to have children, and the parents' nightmare, and it is this endless amount of tragedy. But this cartel only cares about the money they can make from telling these lies. So you can see here, this is projected income for the future because of these lies. The schools, and as the sales basically become the sales department for the companies, this cartel, and they underhandedly push children. They keep it a secret towards transitioning. They keep it a secret from parents. And we can see here in 2023, it was 3 billion in America. It's projected to 400% up in a few years' time. So they were quite happy with their money, but the rest of us have to live with all the negative outcomes. So you can go on YouTube now and see some of the social damage. There are hundreds of videos of young adults who have woken up to the fact that they have been conned by the medical profession. They are detransitioning, but they have mutilated their bodies. They're sterile. They're going to still have to deal with medical consequences for the rest of their life. They probably never have children. Trying to find a partner when they've already who will accept them for who they are will be really hard for them, many of them. And their lives are ruined just because they weren't offered a few hours of counseling at the very start of their journey to help them work through their issues. They express deep regret. They're angry at society that didn't protect them as children. Out of all if you're going to talk about a fruitful ability to live a fruitful life, there's nothing less fruitful than a life as a transitioned individual, you might say, unless you have a very serious medical disability, for example. Amongst people who have transitioned, there's massive amounts of loneliness, depression. They find it hard to build any kind of long-term relationship. Ongoing health problems keep them out of work for many of them. They're more likely to be homeless. They're much more likely, 20 times more likely to commit suicide. It's really, really hard fighting your natural body every day, and the medical pain that you go through as you take all these drugs to fight your natural body. It's not easy at all, and it's a loose. It's not a life you want to, not even your worst enemy, to suffer. But yeah. So what about transgender rights? They say trans rights are human rights, but human rights come from responsibilities. So responsibility to live a lifestyle which helps me and helps society at one and the same time. That's the kind of definition of a right, natural right. So a natal male can't say, I have a natural responsibility to enter into spaces where women are bodily vulnerable, and this will improve social outcomes. This is a no-no. This doesn't work like that. or I have a natural responsibility to enter races where the other participants are native female, and this will improve social outcomes. No, this doesn't work either. But there's no such thing as a natural right for a transitioned individual, apart from the natural rights that exist within the three blessing framework. So, so the only thing is they can be offered invented political rights, which by definition is we have a right to go around harming other groups in society, and that hurts society more than it helps. When we talk about the principle and how the principle can explain transgenderism, in the first blessing we talk about mind and body unity, that the blessings come to the world through our unity between our mind and body. Unity through our mind and body, it generates energy, which leads to existence and action and multiplication. And this in real life, the unity between our mind and body leads to rational thought. We can test our ideas out in the real world and know that they really work. So we get rational thought, and social trust comes from mind and body unity when we physically keep our promises, our verbal promises. So when in transgenderism, the law basically says the body doesn't exist. Therefore, there's no give and take action between mind and body. Therefore, the law itself cannot generate any kind of positive social energy. It can't generate any forces that bring about improved society. So all transgender laws and policies harm. Wherever they're placed, they bring about harm. They can't generate positive energy. They all of them destroy rational thought, and they all destroy social trust. Like men can get pregnant is not a rational thought, and people who listen to politicians who can say that become less trusting of them. So all trans law, because they can't generate, there's no mind and body unity within the law itself, then they all create social decay. And the law cannot afford to leave the biologically based definition of man and woman. It can't, and make it only a psychological one. It cannot do that without crazy huge amounts of social damage, which the politicians in a democracy have no right to create. So to kind of fight this internally on your own level, you have to learn to have compassion for all the people that get harmed. You might have a transgendered friend. That's okay. You could treat them with respect. But the law itself has to look at the social damage and realize that it's too great, and it can't afford to violate mind and body unity. You have to look at millions of women harmed, essentially millions of young people who are operated on and live miserable lives, many of them, and the STEM fields of a nation which get corrupted, and the sports industries and the fitness of the health of all citizens in general will go down, and the democracy will fail as more and more people are unable to live fruitful lives. So, okay. So we end up with this situation where the cartel, the drug companies and the operation industry and all kinds of things are having lots of experimental work going on children and advancing science. The science in this area, in the sense of the technology improves all the time, but the more they operate, the less human we become. So we have the entrance now of transhumanism, which is we are entering into an era where we can completely dominate nature and create humans who are completely unnatural, and and the negative effects of us separating ourselves from the natural world is a disaster, is going to be disastrous for humanity. So eventually men will be able to get pregnant. There's no thought of the child, whether the child wants to be, nobody's asking the child if they want to be born into a male's body and not have the motherly love that they have a right to. Human embryos coming from human cells and the degradation possible of the human genome that will come from that. We'll all get affected by that, and the cross-gender facial enhancement surgery, so it'll be harder and harder to tell what men and women apart, and the DNA manipulation, it's designer babies, people with both a penis and vagina. What's a male, what's a female gets totally confused. Men with penis and breasts. AI augmented human beings is already coming. It's almost a reality. And of course, there's lots of money about this, but no one's, but without really looking at huge amounts of damage that will happen because of this, we have a terrible future ahead of us. But this is because we allow the experimentation to be taking place right now because of this transgender issue. Okay. So we have these cartels, and they are the different ones, and one of them is the IVF and surrogacy cartel, which makes a lot of money out of finding surrogate mothers. There's a lot of damage in surrogacy, the number of potential embryos, which are viable embryos that get destroyed, the number of children that don't make it to childhood. The failure of surrogacy is very high. Then there's increased rates of disability and health problems in the surrogate children, the IVF children. And there's all kinds of other things like the harm done in egg harvesting, and then there's the harm done to the surrogate mother. Sometimes she dies in birth, especially if she comes from a developing nation and she leaves her own children motherless. And you name it, there's endless, and it's unregulated. We don't know anything about the people who buy and sell these children. There's no screening. They could be pedophiles, many of them. They're just buying children to have sex with them at a very young age, and we are entering into a world where we are allowing this to happen, and with no control over it. So, but the IVF surrogacy push forward using the Marxist game plan. Basically, we have to have sympathy on those people who can't have children through natural means. We have to do something, and that means we have to buy and sell children who don't want to be bought and sold and who don't want to be medically experimented on. But we have to do this to comfort the adult's heart. So the IVF and surrogacy cartel realized that it could make a lot of money, more money, if marriage was redefined to include same-sex couples, if the definition of marriage could be broadened, or the social, from a child-focused definition, we married to best protect our biological children, to a definition which is more focused on adults' happiness. That we should let these people marry because it makes them happier. This redefining, because it's based upon the Marxist game plan, ultimately leads to other groups getting harmed, especially children. So there are four main groups of children, at least, that get harmed in order. So we can see on the left, the society refuses to look at the negative ripple effects for the wider society from the redefining of the word marriage. There's no compassion for all the people. The society doesn't have much compassion for all the people harmed because they don't see who's harmed. But so as to help some 1 to 2% of the population feel a bit better about themselves, that they're more accepted, they can use the word marriage. Ultimately, millions of people suffer worse life outcomes. It's not just their feelings are not hurt, but they have outcomes in life which make it harder for them to live a fruitful life. It's more likely to suffer lineage decline. So many more people are hurt than helped. So who are hurt? First, it's the children who are being bought and sold. As mentioned before, there's IVF and surrogacy. It has potential health risks and disabilities, not to mention all the children that die in the process. And then when the child is born, they're sold in surrogacy, and they don't want to be sold, and they are subject to greater risks of sexual abuse, and they don't have the role modeling that they need for them to ultimately. It's harder for them to understand how male-female dynamics work and build their own successful families, and then they have an attachment trauma because at least one of the partners, one of the parents, is not their biological parents, and they feel more likely to be angry at how they've been separated from their own natural mother or father. They're more likely to be demotivated from life. So you can look at all these negatives, and we in the law says, yes, you can hurt these children this way. Adults, you can do that, and the law takes no responsibility for the damage it creates. The second thing that happened is the teaching of comprehensive sex education in schools. As soon as the redefining of marriage came in, the leftists could get curriculums in school, make lots of money from their sex curriculums, and teach children sexuality at a very young age, and sell them books and videos, and it's been a disaster for many children. They get encouraged to experiment with same-sex sexuality, and I met some girls this week who are still at school, and they said in their class, out of 20 girls, it's an all-girls school, 17 of the girls are now declare themselves to be lesbian, but and there's a boys' school nearby, and they have a very similar scenario where boys have sex with each other, and seem to be cool and progressive, but no one talks about the increased rates of diseases or self-harm or drug abuse or sex abuse by older males, or that is endemic within the LGBT community, and evidently 85% of the children in the school were not born to be lesbian. They are being distracted, and it's going to make them harder to build their own marital families ultimately. It's hard, men or women don't want to marry a bisexual male, a male who can switch between males and females, and in general, women don't, men don't want to marry a bisexual woman either. It's going to be harder for them to find partners, and the teachers encourage this, and they become the salespeople for the surrogacy and IVF companies, and say we're going to create a whole new world of tolerance, but it's a whole new world of decay. Then you have the Christianity, which is tearing itself to pieces all over the world. Every denomination has been negatively impacted on by this redefinition of marriage. Many churches have closed down. Nobody wants to be called a bigot. because Christianity can see the damage. If you're, if you really study the Bible, you can understand that this hurts children, that it's not a good thing for children, that marriage is redefined. But just the law now basically says if you disagree, you're a bigot, homophobe, and people don't want that label, and so they'd rather leave their church. And many churches are either closing, many are highly divided, like the Church of England now, and Christian, and fewer children are growing up in a church community where they would have better values and taught about a three blessings lifestyle and how to be responsible members of society, and they're more likely now to enter into, without the protection of the church community, more likely to have extra risks and live less fruitful lives. So that's another group of children that have been seriously impacted and their well-being undermined. And lastly, when you redefine the social purpose of marriage from a child-centered definition to an adult one, then heterosexuals themselves are less likely to marry, because the sentence is you should marry because to find human adult happiness, and it's not, the social sentence is no longer you should marry to protect your biological children. And this loss of this sentence, which we used to control so much of the social space, if you're pregnant, you should marry to best protect your children, is weakened. And so fewer people marry now after the redefinition of marriage. Cohabitation goes up in every nation, and it's less stable, and the children suffer there too. So from that, so you have all these different groups of people, children, who are seriously negatively affected in order to allow for a tiny number of people in society to feel a little bit better about themselves. And the decay is endemic now. It's set in motion. We have it. There's no control over it. Trying to get control over it is impossible with the definition redefined. And we will see this play out over the next 20, 30 years as more and more people live lonely lives, are addicted to something, unable to hold down jobs, and much, much more. And the law is doing this, but the cartel is making a nice lot of money, and they're enjoying themselves, and the politicians are raking in their donations, and the left-wing activists are doing very well, thank you, and the gender studies department are expanding and doing very well. But all the other university science departments are going to be suffering the negative outcomes. So is there such a thing as gay rights? Natural rights come from my responsibility to act in a way that benefits me and society at one and the same time. But can two males or females say, we have a natural responsibility to marry in order to best protect and nurture our biological children? No, they can't say that. They can only say, maybe we should marry, we better protect our abort children. But you've already, in that sentence, abort children, already violated the child's rights, and you've set in motion a greater level of risk and harm for the child. And so you cannot say we're helping society by doing this. We are benefiting emotionally as adults, but the children in society have to pick up the pieces of what we're doing to the children. So Mother Nature can't offer natural rights to those who are same-sex attracted. It can only offer invented political rights, which basically say we allow this group of citizens to harm this group of citizens. So here we see the effect, the surrogacy market, the money pouring into the cartel coffers. It's now worth 15 billion, and it's reckoned to go up in 10 years to 100 billion, 600 times higher, and all the children who are bought and sold. And in an era where we talk about the end of slavery, we are entering into a slave-like world where children are bought and expected to fulfill the desires of those who bought them, basically. And we don't look at all the harm that that creates. And the IVF money-making machine has a similar growth pattern, not as sharp as a surrogacy, but up from 20 billion today to 40 billion in 10 years, so double. So we look again at what the principle says about this, the three blessing framework, where in the second blessing we have husband and wife representing God's love, and as they represent God, the best picture we have, you might say, of what God might look like. They are the best place, provide the best opportunity for children to grow up nurtured and protected. And this generates positive social energy, and children can go forwards with their life, much more likely to build successful lives and bring about positive influence in our communities. But the energy that is generated comes from the creation of the child. It's not the couple don't generate the energy. The energy that brings about the future development, the forces, the positive forces of existence and action and multiplication are generated by the couple having a child and doing their best to raise it to be an honourable child, and that the expansion of that leads to schools and a lot of civil society and sports and all kinds of other things, which generates huge amounts of wealth and positive social energy. So the term marriage is guided by the word multiply, the ability to multiply and have children. But the same-sex couple can't have a child. They cannot generate the forces that lead to social development. They by themselves, of course, they can make positive influence. They can be good people, and they can have a very interesting career that helps society, and there's no doubting that. But they can't have a child and therefore generate positive energy through the second blessing. So they can't enter into the second blessing. They can't multiply. They can only gain a child through violating the child's natural rights. In violating rights, they increase its chance of undermining its well-being. What does that mean? If you had a community solely of same-sex couples, then it would quickly suffer. It would quickly go into a state of decay with the sexual norms and the behaviors and the traumas of the children who don't have the love of the biological parents and more, the increased risks involved and everything. You would very quickly go into decay, which is not the same with a community of heterosexual couples. We see very stable communities over generations from such family structures. So lastly, we just look at how bad this is, what we are really, the seriousness of what's happening in society. We have these three blessings: be fruitful, grow to be fruitful, nurture and protect marry, nurture and protect your biological children, and look after your economic needs and feed your family and house your family. And that's your job. And do that and society will be blessed. So each of these three blessings comes with like a social purpose: be fruitful, multiply, and take dominion and of your economic life. And we saw under Marxism, economic Marxism in Russia, we saw that the Marxist game plan pushed for the redefining of the social purpose of the third blessing. Instead of saying you have a responsibility to feed your own family and house your own family, it became you have a responsibility to make sure other families are fed and housed. That's your job. We are socialists. And that led to a demotivating effect because if you worked hard, others didn't. There was a total unfairness in the whole setup where your own talents couldn't be used because the economy was controlled, and many people turned to alcohol based upon this redefinition of the third blessing. So what we see in the redefining of the social purpose of marriage, to include same-sex couples, the definition of what should guide society forward which was please be fruitful, please marry and have children, and that will generate positive social energy, is redefined to basically say adult happiness is more important than child well-being. So it's a reversal of the ethos, which the ethos should be, oh, I should sacrifice my desires to improve my child's well-being. It gets reversed to the child should make, sacrifice itself and its well-being so I can feel like I'm having a meaningful life as a parent. And this is so this is the same implication as a full-blown Marxist coup, you might say. What it means is that as we saw the damage within that caused by the redefining of the third blessing, social purpose of the third blessing led to endemic loss of growth and mass alcoholism. The same effect will be by redefining marriage. Eventually, we will see appalling death of community life, you might say. And the same happens in transgenderism, where the redefining of the purpose of the first blessing, which is you should strive to be fruitful, in part becomes we can neglect the reality of the physical world and still build a flourishing society. And when that sentence becomes more and more endemic within the social fabric, we will become more like a lunatic asylum with people suggesting things that have no basis in reality. And the negative impact of losing your science departments, your talented young people to a crazed cult will be dire. So all of these things trap nations into a spiral of decay they can't get out of. It's authoritarian because it's held in place through fear. You're transphobic, you're homophobic, etc. And meanwhile, these cartels get wealthier, and the rest of us suffer negative outcomes, increase knife crime, increase drug abuse, increase failure to build families, and loneliness and alcoholism. And now, our societies are not looking forward to a bright new world of tolerance and happiness, which is what the left proclaims. So we'll finish here. I hope this was helpful, and next week we'll talk about how we can see this through a different this issue through a different paradigm. So thank you very much. I wish you all well. Thank you. Bye-bye.